I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening. We'll go ahead and start with the roll call.
Trustee Spurling? Here. Trustee Lee?
Here.
Trustee Hines? Trustee Youngerman?
Here.
Trustee Marisak? Trustee Bond?
Here.
And we do have a quorum present this evening. Move on to item 4 this evening, public participation. This is a public comment period first. If there's any member of the public that wishes to address the board, you may do so at this time. I don't think we have anybody this evening. So go ahead and move on to a proclamation that I will read regarding National Engineers Week. Whereas engineers have used their scientific and technical knowledge and skills in creative and innovative ways to improve society's quality of life, and whereas engineers face the major technical challenges of our time, from rebuilding towns devastated by natural disasters to revolutionizing our infrastructure and technical progress, and whereas engineers are encouraging our youth, math and science students to realize the practical power of their knowledge, and whereas we look more than ever to engineers and their knowledge and skills to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Now therefore, I, Matt Brawley, President of the Village of Montgomery, on behalf of its citizens and village officials, do hereby proclaim the week of February 16th through the 22nd, 2014, to be National Engineers Week in all of Montgomery, and dated this February 10th of 2014. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the exciting part of the evening, the swearing in of Police Officer Jenny Rizzo. With that, I'll ask the Chief of Police to come to the podium.
Thank you, Village President. Tonight, I would like to introduce Officer Jenny Rizzo as our one of our new officers. She's had a long journey here recently, and I'll explain that here in a couple minutes. Tonight in the audience, her mother, Connie, her godmother and cousin, Margarita, her brother, Eric, her father, Kuko, her grandfather, Randall, and her husband, Alex, all in the second row there. So thank you for coming tonight. In March of 2012, Jenny was hired as a dispatcher for the Montgomery Police Department. At the same time, you recall, we came over and I introduced you to her back then as a dispatcher. At the same time, she was also an officer on our police list. So she was up in the top 10% of the police list. So later that year, she was hired on January 4th, 2013, as an officer for the Village of Montgomery Police Department. She had graduated from the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy, and as you know, we were transitioning at that time to KenCom. Jenny was a dispatcher, so she immediately helped us out tremendously in dispatch. After graduating from the academy, went back to dispatch while we transitioned through pretty much all of the end of October of 2013. So Jenny currently is in the Field Training Officer Program and is doing very well. So tonight I'd like to introduce Officer Jenny Rizzo, not dispatcher Jenny Rizzo.
Ready for me? All right. Want to go up to the front there? That to look good too. Okay. Raise your right hand as I try and button this. And repeat after me. I, Jenny Rizzo,
I, Jenny Rizzo,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police officer
the duties of police officer
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Picture.
Congratulations. We'll see you in court.
Didn't do it. Didn't do it. We swore somebody in last time when you were here.
I did.
All right, moving on. Since we still are in the public participation portion of this evening, I'll go back to public comment. I knew we had one individual that wanted to address the board this evening. So come on down to the podium. If you can state your name and sign in, so we have your information.
Yes, I'm Lynn O'Shea, and I am the president of the Association for Individual Development in Aurora, and I currently chair the Show You Care Cane campaign. Thank you very much for letting me have a couple of minutes to talk to you this evening. I'm here to talk about a very, very important problem here in our community. It's about people born with developmental disabilities and the services that they need and the families that so desperately rely on them. Right now in Kane County, we have over 1,000 children and adults with developmental disabilities on waiting lists for services. And the sad fact is many of them, on average, have been on that waiting list for more than 10 years. Let me say that again. They've been on a waiting list for more than 10 years. The state funding for these services has been capped at $22,000 for over 10 years. So the only way someone gets into service now is to have someone die or move out of state. On average, 15 new people in Kane County are lucky enough to win the lottery draw, and that's what it takes, a lottery draw, to move into one of those 15 vacancies. Approximately 300 students graduate from special education in Kane County every year. So you can see 15 to 300, that's why we have this growing problem. There is a solution, though, and the solution is a very local solution. The state law allows for a county-based referendum to create a developmental disability service board, levy a small property tax to enable services to be provided to its residents with developmental disabilities. Yes, there is a cost, but in overall, looking at money, that expenditure is relatively small. On average, a household with a home assessed, valued at $187,000, which is the countywide average now, would be assessed a $56 a year tax increase after the homestead exemption is applied. So we're talking about really $1 a week that would make the difference in the lives of these people with developmental disabilities. What do they need? Well, they need job training, they need placement into group homes when their parents are no longer able to take care of them. They need therapy such as speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. And the families who are willing to care for them at home for as long as possible need respite care, time out, just a break away. So for $1 a week, on average, we can help our neighbors and friends with developmental disabilities. And the survey we did about a year and a half ago, we found that 80% of the people who live in Kane County know someone with a developmental disability. So I would suspect at least 80% of you here tonight know who I'm talking about. Someone with autism, mental retardation, Down syndrome, epilepsy. These are people that need our help. They can't help themselves. And the waiting lists are ever growing. We think that it's a good investment in our future because the alternative is not good. We either pay now and provide what people need at the time they need it, or we pay later. State institutions are the only other alternative. The cost to have someone in a state institution, as of last year, the per capita cost is $177,000. If we invest a few $1,000s on our local citizens and care for them well, not only do we save money, we're closer to the problem, we can make better decisions, and in the end, our families and our community is enriched by this. So I'm hoping you will help us by letting your community know what is going on, the importance of this issue that's coming up on the March 18th ballot. And you are actually the closest form of government to this problem and really instrumental in its solution. So we're going to ask you to please let your constituents know what the issues are, and then they can decide for themselves. Surely we hope people vote yes. That's why I'm here tonight. I'd be happy to answer a couple of questions if you have time.
If anybody has any questions, you can contact her, and we'll read through the materials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a waiver of bid. So we'll need all, but you can vote. So-
Yes.
So, yes, so maybe pull that one off, so treat that one separately.
Okay, well, we'll move on with the consent agenda. What I was asking Attorney Anderson was, with the 5 board members here tonight, if we need a supermajority or how many votes we need for things. So item G this evening, I'm going to pull that, and that's going to be item B for separate action, as that will need all 5 of us voting in favor for passage this evening. With that, I will read through the consent agenda. If you have any questions, we can ask them. Otherwise, we'll look for a motion to approve, not a motion to adjourn, like last time. Consent agenda. Executive session minutes, January 13th, 2014. Minutes of the village board meeting of January 27th. The building report from January of 2014. Accounts payable through February 4th of 2014. The appointment of Mike Hammond to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The appointment of Patrick Kelsey to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Ordinance 1609, amending water rates in and out of the Village of Montgomery. And this is a waiver of the first and passage on the second. And then Resolution 2014-004, providing a credit against water fees for certain properties outside the village. And if there are not any questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling? Yes. Trustee Lee?
Yes.
And that carries 4-0. We'll move on to items for separate action this evening. Item A is a 1-year extension of the agreement for animal control services that's set to expire in April of 2014 between Kane County and the Village of Montgomery.
Chief will address it.
And with that, I'll ask the Chief Myers if you have anything, a summary on this item.
This agreement we've entered into with the County of Kane for the last several years. This is how, when we have a stray dog or a lost dog in Kane County, we will call them out to come and pick them up. So it's pretty important agreement, and I appreciate any support.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the chief on this? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Bond, second by trustee Youngerman.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling? Yes. Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
And that carries 4-0. Item B for separate action, which was the waiver of bid and award of contract in the amount of $99,982 to the Brookman Group of Naperville for the village-wide landscape maintenance services. I don't think staff has a presentation on this. Like I said, I pulled this because of the 2 board members that are absent, so we've talked about this previously. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and second. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
President Brody?
Yes. And that carries 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to items for discussion this evening, the capital improvement program funding. And with that, I will kick things off with Administrator Zolfel.
Thank you, President Brawley. This is a topic that we have discussed in the past, but not with this board, and we've never fully finished the discussion about where we want to go with it. So what we're looking to do tonight is have a little discussion with you on our road program, the future of our road program. I will say in addition to that, there are other CIP items out there that the village has and will be having in the future years, but we're trying to focus on roads tonight. Engineer Waller is going to do a little presentation about that. And then Attorney Anderson is going to discuss some of the alternatives that we've looked at. Again, we're not looking for any results to come out of this tonight, no decisions to be made. It's just the first in what will probably be many discussions on this topic. So we'd like to get it started and answer what questions you have tonight or see what further information you'd like to see. And with that, I'll turn it over to Engineer Wallers. I will get this program up.
Good evening. This evening, what we'd like to do is go over the road maintenance program that we've been doing for roughly the last 9 years. This will be the 10th year. I'm going to start off with some definitions because I know some of you haven't been here for the presentations on the roadway system analysis, and I thought there's just a few basics that would be good for you to hear. Give you some data on our roadway system, talk about the recent improvements, which would be the last nominal 10 years, review our last 5-year plan, what we think it's going to take for future expenditures to maintain our roads, and then a funding level analysis to kind of confirm that, and then basic conclusions on that. So start out with a few definitions. First is the program that we use to help us analyze the roadway program is called MicroPaver, and it is based on a program that was developed by the Corps of Engineers and University of Illinois, and it helps determine the amount of expenditure on any given road based on what they call a PCI, or Pavement Condition Index, which is a scale from 0 to 100, 100 being a new, absolutely perfect road, 0 being a completely failed road. So there's a range of roadways in between that. And then lastly, a term you'll hear a lot from us is MFT, that's motor fuel tax funds. That is the primary basis for our road program. That's our core funding, let's say, for the program. In the MicroPaver program, one of the more key elements to it is what's called the pavement deterioration curve. And when you think about it here, this is 0 years to 25 years, and it goes from 0 PCI up to 100. So at the beginning, in year 0, when the road is finished, that's 100. The roadway then starts to deteriorate over this is a theoretical curve. And you know, you can see that it's a fairly slow decay at first, but then there becomes a point where we start to get this downward inflection. And what happens is the cost to maintain the roadway when it's on this flat portion is generally less, and as we get on that declining leg of the curve, the cost for us to repair the road increases somewhat, I wouldn't say exponentially, but it's a significantly more expensive. So what we've generally tried to do is do our maintenance where we're on more or less the flat part of the curve. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, this is a theoretical curve. That's what we use right now to analyze things. We've done 2 analysis where we've gone out and actually measured the PCI of our pavements. So that's been done twice. So we have now 2 points on every street, but we don't quite have enough to make our own curve, and it's going to take us a little while to get to that point. But eventually, we'll have curves on every street so we can see what the decay is on it for our specific streets. But the program right now is used the theoretical, and I'll talk about what changes if those curves change. But the point on this really is that we try to spend our maintenance money to keep it as efficient as we can, to spend as little money as possible to maintain the streets. That's generally what we try to do. But sometimes working on a reconstruct is just unavoidable, and you have to do it. When we did the last study, which was in '08, '09, we had 74 miles of pavement. In '03, when we started, we had 50 miles of pavement. So there was a significant amount of roadway that was added in a short period of time. So we basically, added 25 miles in that period. Because of that, our overall pavement condition index village-wide is at 80. But if you take away all those new streets, we're really looking at a system that in '03 was 77, and then that same system in '08 was 72. So you can see that we started to see a decline in our pavement condition index. Now, just to put it in perspective, 70, a good condition is anywhere from 56 to 70, so very good in terms of the system, 71 to 85. So we're still in a pretty good position overall, but you can start to see that we're starting to see a decline in our PCI, which is certainly of concern, but we're not in a critical state by any means. Over the last 10 years, we have averaged about $650,000 a year. It varies from year to year. It depends on the allocation of MFT monies we get and the amount of federal dollars that we get, which we try to obviously capture as many federal or state grants as we can for our program. So in total expenditures over the 10-year period, we spent about $6.5 million. Of that 6.5, about $2.5 million was from grants. So that averages out to about $652,000 a year. Obviously, some years more, some years less. So about $394,000 in village funds, and then the rest in grants. So we get about 40% of our road monies in grants or either federal or state grants. And we've done about 12.5% of the system over that period of time, and you can see that most of it was resurfacing, a little bit of it was reconstruction, again, sometimes unavoidable, and then we tried to do as much crack sealing as we could, given the resources that we had. This gives you an overall graphical indication of where the work on the streets are. Probably the thing to keep in mind here is most of our road work has been on the east side of town, which you might expect because that's our older roads. You will notice that Lakewood Creek Boulevard or Lakewood Creek Drive was done. Now, we did make that into what's called an FAU route, so we were able to use federal money to resurface that roadway. And we've tried to add roads to the federal aid urban sections when we can so that we are eligible for federal money. You can only use those federal funds on FAU designated routes, so like Douglas, Auckett, Lakewood Creek. There's several others, Dixon Road, a number of other streets that we've gotten into that system. You start running out of colors when you get 10 years, but you can see a lot of the work there on the east side is where we've been spending our money. And then you can see it just a little bit onto the west side. And even then, it's been kind of the middle part of the village, really a little bit onto the far west. And again, where you have higher traffic volumes, that's oftentimes where you need to be able to be doing a rehab sooner than later. So typically what we do is we budget about $330,000 out of our MFT allotment. We get approximately $480,000, but we use about $150,000 to $160,000 for salt for roadway maintenance. So at the end of the day, we get about $330,000. Micropaver looks at our system and tells us that it suggests that we should be spending about $2.2 million annually to maintain the PCI. So I want to talk a little bit more about that recommendation in a bit, but just that's what the computer model tells us. Just to summarize quickly here on the last 5-year program, and I guess one takeaway here is that at the end of each one of our pavement management system updates, we publish a 5-year plan based on the revenue that the board elects to secure or I guess designate for roadway maintenance. And we follow that plan then to make sure that we've accomplished that. So we're able to accomplish all of the things in the 5-year plan, but in addition to that, because of the federal money, we're able to add streets. So you can see, like in year 1, we were able to add Mill, Pearl, Taylor, Madison, Clinton, and Caterpillar Drive. So each year you'll see that. We complete everything and then we typically add some roadways, so that's worked out well for us. Again, we've not had a program year where we weren't able to complete all of the things on the list. In year 5, what we've got programmed right now is shown. That will be in the FY15 budget, so obviously that'll come to be approved by you at a later time, but that's what's proposed right now. So again, just maybe a little bit of a summary. We've gotten through all of our programmed roadways. We were fortunate enough to get quite a bit of funding in that 5-year period, which really helped us get a lot of work done. We got emergency repair funds from the state, from Representative Chapalavia, and that was really helpful. So we did a lot of work in the last 5-year program. So then the question comes, what should we be spending for roadway maintenance? So micropaver indicates 2.2 million, and it seems like a lot of money, and it seems like we're doing a pretty good job with the monies we're spending. But when you take a step back and look at it, and you know how a micropaver calculates things, it uses that deterioration curve. We input actual costs that we see from our bidding experience, both here in the village and other communities that we work in. And there's a range of square foot depending on the type of maintenance you apply to the roadway. It uses that historic and actual cost data then to make recommendations in terms of expenditures and streets to use to repair each year and what the actual costs are. So it may be no surprise then that if it's recommending 2.2, it's somewhat based on that 20 to 25 year cycle. Right now we average $652,000 a year. That's about 5,500 feet a year. That's 1.4% of the system. Our target probably should be somewhere to 4 to 5%, which would be on the 20-25 year cycle. So if you look at it in a 20-25 year cycle, we should be spending about 1.8 to 2.3 million. That's what we would expect. So it kind of ties back that the micropaver estimate's probably not out of line. It probably makes some sense. I think there's room certainly for refinement, but it gets us, I think, order of magnitude dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the curve that we have is theoretical, so that means that some streets are going to decay faster and some are going to go out longer. Each one of our streets will have a unique curve, but for the purposes of the general estimate, we've been using the theoretical curve. As we continue on with the program, we'll certainly refine how we look at street decay and how we budget, but again, order of magnitudes, I think we're in that range of costs. So if we take another step back, and I always like to kind of do a check myself because, you know, when you have a black box doing calculations for you, sometimes you get concerned. So if we look at our past 10-year summary, again, the 652, we average somewhere about a little over a mile annually. That's about a 71-year rehabilitation cycle. So each street we'd be back about every 71 years. If we used MFT dollars only, if we didn't have federal dollars, we'd be on a 143-year cycle. You know, 71 years is probably too long. I think most people could probably grasp that. You know, you don't have to be an engineer to realize you probably need to be back doing some work more often than that. What's the real answer? Well, I think it's somewhere between that 20 and 25 year cycle. If we budget for a 25-year cycle, we need to do about 3 miles per year. That would be about 1.8 million. And if we did a 20-year resurfacing cycle, it'd be 2.3. Now, could we achieve 3 miles for 1.5 million? Maybe. You know, we might be able to. We've been pretty fortunate in being able to stretch our dollars through our bidding and that sort of thing. But again, order of magnitude is telling us that we're probably not spending enough money on our resurfacing program. So our conclusions and recommendations are that we should continue to do the roadway evaluation updates. We think that it's money well spent. It gives us a benchmark to move from. It has been good to have that 5-year plan in place so that we can carry it out and, according to the board's direction. We think utilizing as much preventive maintenance and resurfacing to avoid reconstruction makes a lot of sense. And we'd probably do more preventive if we had a larger budget, but sometimes we're a little bit hamstrung in terms of how much preventive maintenance we can do because we lose some of the order of magnitude and, the mobilization costs and other things sometimes work against us, so we don't want to do too small a program sometimes. Certainly, we're going to continue to get as much federally funded cost sharing as we can on our projects. That's been successful for us. We'll continue to pound away at that. And then I think it's really important that we should look for some additional funding to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. And again, whether it's 1.8, 2.2, or some number in between, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure we're not spending enough money right now to do the maintenance. And we won't see this, we'll start to see a continual decline in the quality of our streets over time, and it's hard to get it back up once you've lost a good rating. So that's it for me. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
I got one real quick, especially with the weather this year, it's bad, but what, it was 74 miles in 208, aren't we? Mike's not here, but I thought he said we're over 100.
Well, I think he might be indicating, I'll get you the exact number, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And sometimes we talk in terms of lane miles and actual miles, and there's a little discrepancy there, but I'll get the
All right.
exact
Oh,
number
that's
for you.
right, okay,
Current.
thank you.
I had a question about the chart, the degradation curve.
Sure.
Given that it starts at 100, we must have made some presumption that all of our streets were just fine at that outset, or what were our presumptions there?
Sure. So when we do the, as I say, we've done 2 ratings. So when we do the rating, we go to every street and we section off representative sections of the street and then go through and go a detailed foot-by-foot analysis of that roadway, and determine, like, are there longitudinal cracking, is there block cracking, whatever it is, so that street gets a rating. Typically, if the subdivision just had its street paved and we go out there, it's likely going to get near 100 rating. It might be a 98 or something like that. But each street gets independently rated based on its condition at the time of the analysis. And we did the first one nominally in, I think it was 2003 or 2004, and then we did the next rating in 2008, 2009.
So the presumptions are based on actual observation.
Right, and there's a rating system. Micropaver comes with a system so that when you see a certain size and length crack, it's a deduct of so many points. And each type of failure, like if it's alligator cracking, it might have a failure, a different failure reduction than if it's a block crack. And so that's the thing about micropaver that we like, is it takes the guesswork out of it. So it's not subjective. It's not you and I drive the street and we go, yeah, that street looks pretty bad. It's we send out 2 people, they go through it, measure off a section, and then go through and rate the section. And based on what the program tells them to do, they make the deductions. And then that's how the PCI is determined. And that's, in the long version of this presentation, we have that detail. So anytime you want that, I'll be happy to come back with that.
Any other questions of Pete at this time? He'll still be here, obviously, so you can continue asking questions, but if not, we'll try and move on to the next section.
Thank you.
So what we're trying to do is establish that we do need to be spending more money on our roads. And we feel we've got a pretty good estimate of what that is, obviously. So then we sat down as staff and tried to look at some of the different options we would have for making up that difference between what we currently have on hand and what we need to be spending. And Attorney Anderson included a memo in your packet that I believe he's going to walk you through.
Yeah, I'm going to go over the points in the packet. You don't actually need to worry about the packet. But in my mind, well, first off, thank you to Engineer Wallers for putting that together and figuring out what we need to spend money on. Thanks again for turning it over to me to find the money. Appreciate that, Pete. It seems to me you've got 5 categories that you could potentially see the money come from, but very quickly, I think you'll see that very few of them are actually viable, unfortunately. The first one is, of course, your general fund MFT dollars. As Pete's already pointed out, that's going to leave you at a rating of 143-year cycle, which maybe in 143 years, we won't need roads anymore. So we could go on hope as a strategy, but I don't think that's probably what you want to do. Second option would be SSAs. You're all familiar with SSAs from basin maintenance. They can be used for many things, including roadways, if appropriate. The limitation, though, is that it has to be for a distinct area. You can't do a special service area for the entire village, because then it's not special. It's supposed to be limited in scope and size and deal with a particular issue for a particular neighborhood, basically. Now, we could do 50 SSAs across the village to try to accommodate that, but the problem there is you're going to have to pass each one individually, and if 51% of the voters in that area say no, then it's a no. So it's a very unreliable way to do it. There are a few communities that have experimented with it, but they did it at times before residents had moved into areas so that there was single ownership by a developer. It's not really viable for you. Another option is a business district. Business districts are, they essentially allow you to levy an additional sales tax or tax in a given area. Again, it's a given area, has to have businesses, and the money can only be used in the district. So again, can't be used village-wide, not very viable. So that leaves you really with 2 options, and that's why I said very quickly, you'll get down to 2 options. The first of those options is home rule, going for home rule status. Once you have home rule status, you are no longer subject to the property tax extension limitation law, which means that you can levy as much taxes as you see fit as a board. That is a very viable option if you choose to exercise it. It requires referendum approval by the voters. Whether or not you think that that's appropriate to go for, I leave to you, as policy decision makers to determine that. If you do obtain home rule status, you have a panoply of powers, not just taxing powers, but regulatory powers, a great deal of other abilities. In effect, what it really means is that if it is not prohibited by the Constitution, it is allowed. So you can come up with creative solutions for lots of different problems. But one of them it does address is taxation. And then the last option that we could reasonably come up with was the non-home rule sales tax. So this is an increase of up to 1% of your sales tax in the village. Doing this also requires referendum. It is less of a referendum, though, in a sense, than home rule, because you're only asking for one discrete thing. It also can only be used for 3 things currently, but really traditionally it's only been used for 2. The 3 purposes presently, today, that it can be levied for is infrastructure, which is obviously what we're talking about, abatement of property taxes, which, you could do that, but if you're going to use it for infrastructure, they're kind of mutually exclusive. And the third one is operations. Operations was put in, and it's got a sunset clause. The state of Illinois allows for it, but that means you could use it to pay staff and things like that if you wanted to. If you choose to go down this route, you do have to elect whether you want to do just infrastructure or infrastructure and operations. And that will impact, I think, the policy discussion that you have, particularly with the voters, whether it's dedicated and pledged to one thing or multiple things. So we think out of the 5 I've outlined, probably 2 of them are most viable, home rule status or non-home rule sales tax. And with that, I can take any questions.
Couple of questions, if I may. Have you seen situations where the capital improvement portion of a sales tax initiative is broken into different categories? For example, building and grounds would be one segment, and infrastructure, roads, water management, drainage, another?
Not on the ballot itself. That's fairly constricted what it would say, but certainly in referendum appeals to the voters prior to the vote, I've seen communities talk about their intent and their plans for what the money will be used for, and then they do talk about specific projects.
Yeah, I have seen that too, and that sometimes is a popular approach. But there isn't any penalty for not telling the truth after it's passed either.
That's correct.
The second thought would be, do we have the ability to pass or propose a sales tax referendum for a defined period of time?
The statute isn't set up that way. There is a provision for repeal of it as well, but that's also referendum. I don't believe, I'd have to review the statute. That's a question I really haven't confronted. My gut reaction is probably not, because of the way it's set out with both a creation referendum and a repeal.
Okay. Will it be a popular vote to repeal it?
Might be.
Okay.
All right, if there are no other questions,
I have questions.
all right.
We're just getting warmed up here. As a board, I think that we're faced with a unique challenge with the growth that Montgomery has had. No other previous boards have really had to deal with this. All the roads on the west side are still relatively new. But with Engineer Waller's presentation, we see that and we've known that we're severely underfunded as far as capital improvements. I had called Jeff earlier today and let him know that I was going to be asking this question. That way they could come up with a number here, and I see Justin moving his papers around. He's probably got the figures ready for me. And as I see the tax rates, and thank you for this sheet, because it kind of provides us with a overview of everything. I'm just going to ask, if Montgomery, Kane, Montgomery, Kendall, we're at 7% in Kane, we're at 7.25% in Kendall, and if I understand this correctly, if we did, say we went with an option number 2, a non-home rule referendum and increase sales tax above 0.5, we would have to increase them equally. Is that correct? We can't bring them both to 7.75.
You'd have to choose
It would have to be 1%
or half
whatever?
percent, whatever it
Okay.
was.
Now, that being said, that would put us in line with Oswego at we'll say 1%. Puts us in line with Sugar Grove at 8%. At, 8.25% and 8%. So we'll say 0.75%, whatever it is. Can you give me an approximate amount of revenue that would be generated by raising the sales tax to either 7.75 or 8%? What revenue would that be? And I'm having a feeling that we're still going to be significantly short of our capital improvements goal.
Each quarter percent would produce approximately $425,000. So if you're looking at the full, if it were to be a full 1%, that's about $1.7 million of taxes.
Each quarter percent is how much?
Is $425,000.
If you went with the 1%, you'd generate about 1.7 million, would be our estimate.
And that's at existing businesses the way we have them now. Does that include Sam's Club?
That does not include Sam's Club.
Okay. And yeah, the issue of taxation and increasing taxes is never a popular discussion. I think, like I stated earlier, this board is faced with a significant challenge, and what are we going to do? I want to see, we need to improve our capital funds budget, our capital improvements budget, but I want to do it in such a way where we are spreading that cost out among as many people as we can. If there are shoppers that are coming into Montgomery to shop, I want to see them share the burden. I'm apt to do the option that carries as little burden on the residents of Montgomery as possible. Now, that being said, I'm open to discussion on all options and even options that Attorney Anderson didn't mention. The other question I had asked Jeff earlier today, there were tax incentives given to businesses for business attraction prior to this board and prior to the other boards. And I'm just going to use the example of Walmart. How much longer do we have as far as those tax incentives? And I asked this question, and Jeff had made mention to me, sorry, Dale, Jeff had made mention to me earlier that this doesn't affect capital improvements, but it does affect the general fund, correct?
Correct.
Do we have an answer there?
I do have when each one of the rebate agreements expires.
Can you just kind of give us a rundown?
Sure.
Just when it expires and,
Sure. Walmart was approved, opened in 2007. The end date of that agreement is January 2027. JCPenney's opened July of 2007, and the end date would be July of 2022. The remainder of Ogden Hill, there's the Menards and various outlots there. That started October of 2007, and the end date is September of 2022. And then, of course, the most recent one being Sam's Club. We're anticipating the opening sometime this year in 2014, and the agreement goes through August of 2028. So those are the beginning and end dates of the 4 agreements that we have right now.
okay. And like I said, I understand that doesn't affect our capital and improvements. You wouldn't happen to have the figures on what that would increase the general fund by when they all expire, do you?
Each one of these,
And you can say no if you don't have an answer.
I don't have.
I didn't say I was going to ask that question, so I'm kind of
I don't have the
throwing that on you.
now.
These are prorated, correct?
What's that?
These are prorated as far as getting more taxes as the years progress?
It depends on the agreements. I went through each of the
Right.
agreements. One of them, it stays 50% all the way through. One of them, it changes every few years. It just depends on the agreement.
And I think it's important to understand that if eventually we decide and we vote yes on this, that the only thing that we're voting yes on is we're voting to put it on the ballot to let the people decide. I don't know if someone else can come up with another option that's better and spreads the burden out amongst our borders and past our borders even more, then I'm all ears. So I guess those are my comments.
Couple more comments, if I may. It's my understanding that the Walmart agreement, for example, is that period of time or when certain dollar amounts have been met. And I think the last report I saw on that was that we were kind of ahead of schedule on the dollar amounts. That I didn't have any expectation that that agreement would spin on to 2027.
I don't know what the beginning expectations of it were. It is possible that it would expire before the end of the agreement.
And the other comment I wanted to make is the options that are being discussed tonight are increased revenue. We also have the option of looking at the revenue we already have and reprioritizing it. as you're alluding to, and I think it's important for us to keep that on the agenda. We have made choices in the past that were difficult to make, but they were the right ones, and I think we have to be prepared to do that again.
If we want to do that, we'd be looking at taking money from another fund and moving it into the capital improvement fund, whether it's general or whatever, because what's currently in the capital improvement fund, the utility taxes are spoken for. So we couldn't decide to use those for something else because they have to go towards the debt.
I would
So-
still
So yes,
support-
you could do that. We would just have to take it out of.
When we made those choices, we knew we had this obligation. We've had this street study now for several years. So we made choices to spend our money in other ways, knowing that we had this obligation before us as well. So in my mind, redirecting that flow of revenue is still an option if it's,
Sure, it's always an option. 1.8 million is a large number, so it would be hard to do to find it from throughout, but that's certainly an option.
I guess to tie everything in, because I got a little off course when I started asking about the expiration, are we able, if we wanted to, could we, because, and these tax incentives expiring in 9 years or whatever, they don't necessarily help now, but in the future, could we transfer money from the general fund into the capital improvements? Are we, as
Certainly
long
could.
as there was money there to do that? Okay.
I think the question is we need a new source of revenue, not the old sources. And the home rule is a tough pill to swallow for some people, because like Steve said, you can turn around and raise the taxes, but they really have to have an awful lot of trust in us of what amount. And boards change, and all of a sudden, the price could go up. So it's kind of the only way we could get extra revenue and still have not just Montgomery pay for it is a sales tax, because people come into our community and shop at Walmart and Menards and the rest of the places. And those people are paying, they're on our roads, so they're paying for their roads, basically.
Yes. As you said, both the home rule or the sales tax have to go to referendum, but we felt sales tax was a better choice because we can say, here's what we're using it for. With home rule, there's a lot of other taxes that'd be available to us that people can get a little hinky about.
It's probably a little bit disingenuous to say, we're going to go for home rule because we want to, we have all these other needs and wants, but really, the crux of this discussion is, staff's identified that we're grossly underfunding our capital improvements for our roads, and the last time, and this is why I wanted this discussion to kind of start here, this is where the last board left off in 2011. Decided, we're not going to take any other action, we're just going to essentially push this on to the next board. And so I believe that it's one of our core functions is to find out what to do about this, whether or not, nobody likes talking about increasing revenue, taxes, any of that, but it's our job to find out, how do we fund this in 15 years? Because the easy solution is to say, let's not do anything for 4 years and let's let the next, but then we're not doing our job, what we're here to do. Whether that's sales tax referendum, home rule, vehicle sticker program, any of those, they all have merit in their own world, I guess, but the non-home rule sales tax is asking our residents that shop at our stores, obviously, to pay a small increase, which is $1 on every 100, but then also anybody who comes to shop at the Sam's Club that's going to open up, the first Sam's Club in the entire Kendall County, anybody that comes there is going to help pay for our roads. So that's why I like this. I'm in favor of it. I'd like to see us move forward with discussions. I would like to see us examine what our needs and wants are in 10 years with the bond payoff and the sales tax when the agreements expire, because that's the responsible method, I think, to go through and say, well, right now we can't save, there's $9 million in our general fund. There's no way we're going to cut $1.8 million out of there and put that into roads. I mean, I don't know what percentage it is, but that's huge. But at least if we can look at the big picture and say, if we're going to do this, this is going to mean this cut to our level of services to our residents. or we're going to do this. And if this doesn't pass, then we have to find another solution. Otherwise, I mean, the roads aren't going to go anywhere. So this may take several months for us to kind of walk through this, but as long as there's a majority of the board members that feel like this is an important discussion, we'll keep having this. So,
It is important. We've got to come to some decision about it.
And I think now that it's been presented to this board, all of the roads on the west side in 15 years are going to be in a condition where they're going to be coming up for replacement all at the same time, and we've got to take action.
There is a bright spot as well. As residents, our property values, I think, to a visible extent, are impacted by the quality of our roads and our infrastructure. So when buyers can see that that's been attended to and our neighborhoods are in good shape, it should help us all.
one other thing I was going to say is I'm going to put Engineer Wallers on the spot. If this board and boards didn't increase funding for our roads, so in 15 years when half of our roadway system is up for probably more like resurface or reconstruction, how would the village in 15 years fund that? I mean, what's the probable solution then?
So let's look at in the last report, we had a graph similar to this that had an indication of over projected 5 years, what happens depending on how much money we put into the system. So you can see the top number is the 2.2 million, and you start out with a village-wide average of 80 PCI, and it ends with about 80. So, but what you see is if you drop down and only spend, 600,000, you're going to see a decline in that PCI. Now, it may not decline as much, but that's what we projected back in 08. So what happens then is our PCI is just going to continue to decline, and the cost for us to get it back to that 70 condition is not going to be just resurfacing. It's going to be a lot of reconstruction. So we're probably going to be spending 3 times maybe what we would have if we could have maintained the PCI over the length of that time. It certainly varies because, like I say, some of our roads will survive a lot better than we think, just because of conditions, traffic, underlying soils, maybe mild winters. I think we're going to see some atrocious road conditions this spring. But generally, you would expect that we would just continue to decline, and then, the 2.2 just keeps it at whatever PCI it's at when we start funding it. So the sooner we can start funding it, the better our overall condition of our roads will be, so.
But in 2024, if you had 35 miles of road to do, you would have to bond for it.
Oh, you definitely would, yeah.
So now you're paying interest on your roads program, which is, to me, a waste of taxpayer money when you know the problem now 10 years in advance. But
Yeah.
Okay.
what else you got?
Trustee Youngerman alluded to it, but the last item in your packet was just a list of tax rates in the area. It covers way more communities than you're probably interested in. What I would point out to you is that Aurora, Yorkville, Oswego, Sugar Grove all either have a home rule or a non-home rule sales tax in addition to the state tax, depending on if they are home rule or non-home rule. So it wouldn't put us at a competitive disadvantage, I don't feel, with our other communities if we were to go with this. I know there's some concern about that, about losing shoppers. I'll say, at least for me, when I go to shop, I don't think about what the tax rate is. If I know I need something, I go to that store, and I've never not gone to a store because, well, it's 0.5% higher there. So I guess I would just point that out to you. At this point, this is what we wanted to cover tonight. Again, we wanted to start the discussion. If there's more information that you'd like to see in the future, if you know things tonight you'd like to see, let us know. If not, in the coming days and weeks, if you could contact me or contact Justin and say, I think this would help with the discussion if we had this. If you could bring this to us, because we want to get out, we want you feeling comfortable with this, whether this is the way we go or we come up with another solution. So if there are things you've thought of that you'd like to see, if you could let us know, we would be happy to do that.
One challenge perhaps for Engineer Wallers, if there are game-changing technologies on the horizon that might improve this scenario, now would be a good time to explore them.
For Steve's hover cars, and then we don't need roads.
We don't have a flying DeLorean?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of materials or technique, or moisture
Yeah,
barriers.
we would hope that that's the case. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about from time to time is, doing more microsurfacing, for example, to try to extend some of our resurfacing lengths of time. And I think we'll see some, be able to stretch our dollars a little bit doing that, but I don't think I think order of magnitudes are so great that we just need to be spending a little bit more money to do the maintenance. And a lot of things we stay away from just because our needs are so great to resurface and get some of our streets drivable. We've not been in a good position to just do preventive maintenance. We just don't have that extra amount of money to say, okay, we're going to do, 10 miles of microsurfacing this year. And but, the technology improves, but surprisingly, the road technologies haven't improved much over the last 40 years, from what I can see. And part of it is the environment we live in. I mean, this is probably the harshest place for roadways because of our freeze-thaw cycles and our frequency of freeze-thaw during the winter. And this year, with our depth of frost down, 36 inches, I think we're going to see some pretty significant pavement problems this spring.
I think part of our discussion is going to be is how high do we want to go? The .50 would give us, as Justin said, 800,000, but it definitely would be, as low as anybody else around the area. So, or do we go more, once you ask for it?
We would recommend going for the full 1% to get us, we feel that would get us to the amount we need for the annual. But yeah, certainly that's up for discussion if we want to go for a lesser amount. As has been stated here, we have some monies now, utility taxes, that, when the bonds are paid off, that'll free up some money. So we have money in the future. The problem is we don't want to let the roads go from now until that money becomes available, because the problem will just get worse. But yes, that is certainly a decision if the board decides to go forward with the sales tax referendum, have to determine for what amount.
Okay. So it looks like we'll think about this a little bit. I would like to move forward with a report on our bonds and sales tax in the future, and I know that's general fund, usually used in the general fund, so think about how you want to present that. I'm not sure how you present 10 years down the road, but I think this is good that we're going through the budget process as we do this, so. Okay. If you have any other questions, direct them to Justin or Jeff, and we'll have another discussion on this in the future. Moving on, new or unfinished business this evening. Do we have any to come before the board? Hearing none. Move on. You can see the future meeting, State of the Village address, this Thursday morning at 8:30. The Plan Commission for this month has been canceled, correct? Canceled.
We still have that thing at 6 o'clock? Correct, okay.
Okay. And then you can see the regular meetings as we have them. With that, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session this evening to discuss collective negotiating matters pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C2.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Bond?
Yes?
Trustee Spurling? Yes. Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Carries 4-0.
You want to mention that?
You don't want my keys? Okay.
You want to mention it now?
We received from local Performance Food Services. You guys may have read about this in the paper, but the local president of Performance Food Services, Fox River, Bob McKigan, sent a letter of commendation to recognize Police Chief Dan Myers for extraordinary community support and for being amazingly proactive in helping us to deal with a problem that was brought to our attention several weeks ago. Because of his taking an interest in our situation, he was able to coordinate the efforts of several other agencies and our internal loss prevention department to help bring down a theft and drug ring that was operating on the third shift of our warehouse. Directly because of his efforts and those who report to him, we were able to terminate 15 employees who were involved in the theft and drug use trafficking, or both. At least 2 of those individuals were arrested and are facing criminal charges. Performance Food Service Fox River is a more wholesome and safer place to work today because of the actions of the Montgomery Police Department. Having worked and lived in 7 states over the past 30 years, I've had the pleasure to work hand in hand with community leaders and police departments in every place that I have lived. I must say that I have never seen a police department under more solid leadership than the Montgomery Police Department. They are a very professional department, committed to community service, and one that we are all very proud of. Respectfully, Bob McKigan, President, Fox River Foods. Thank you.
Thank you.